as he gazed upon the river was slowly becoming a place that drew all manner of things into itself. Things from ditches, trash, drugs, leaves, logs, debris of all kinds, until it looked like an overly dressed matron trying to pretend she was her former self. The rains were acid, the city stifling, and the river was slowly dying. Its exuberance lost and nothing to refresh itself. The streams were being polluted before they could reach her. She could only pull herself through the bed of the ancient carvings of land made by volcanoes that erupted eons ago, when she was just a young stream, before life happened to her, before progress happened.
For the Portland Native community, we've always been here. We've had our villages here, and we always had the river as a highway to connect the villages from one tribe to another, and as well as a source of economy with trade. The river is also very much a very spiritual element that provides life for all of us.
Then, starting in 1800s, thousands of mainly white settlers arrived in the Portland area. They developed hundreds of industrial sites along the riverbanks, depositing heavy metals and pesticides and other chemicals into the water, soil, and river sediments. Today, those compounds have been found to be harmful to human health and the environment. And because of the contamination, some type of fish found in the Portland harbor, such as bass, carp, and catfish, currently pose health risks to those who eat them.
My first introduction to the river was stories from my grandfather. He grew up in North Portland. In the summertime, in between school sessions, he'd take his little rowboat or canoe over to Swan Island, and he'd camp there for a week. He'd live off of what he caught or hunted. If he was to do that today, the fish would poison him, if there are any fish that are edible at all. It needs to be changed.
Many of these industries contribute to the U.S. military effort in the World Wars, and thousands of African Americans immigrated to Portland to work in the shipyards.
We are the black migration who left a place we knew to descend into a place we didn't know, to experience the same but different, to adapt to change, whether weather or attitude, to blend, to begin again, and not quite blended, but like whole milk that separated into cream and less bodied full milk. However hostile the environment, we endured by the weekend with Friday night dancing and spiritual prancing on Sunday to leave the slights on the floor, enabling us to push onto Monday once more. Hard to verbalize our dilemma, but with a grunt and a oomph and a stare as we stepped forward to work harder with less reward than the others that were there. We first came to Portland. We lived on Russell and Interstate, which is Whitmer's now. And my father and mother both worked as shipyard workers, and one paycheck was used to live on, the other one was put away.
Shipyard workers were exposed to toxic substances such as lead and asbestos.
In the first place, my dad was on his property. He had coal, so he dug coal. And then when we moved to Lawrence, Kansas, he worked at a munition place. So that was the gas and stuff that they were. So again, and then when he got here, he was a chipper.
What is a chip?
The chip the paint off of the.
Yeah, and it has lead paint in it, and other things too. Did he talk about that?
Well, we were ignorant to the fact that could be environment, because he had asthma as a kid.
Yeah.
So he just thought, he didn't realize he was probably being exposed to more and more stuff that was making it worse.
By the 1970s, environmentalists and others were able to reduce the point source contaminants, which is when sewage and other toxins are directly dumped into the river. Point source pollution has improved even more dramatically over the past 30 years thanks to the Big Pipe project.
I've worked on the river, I've worked over the river, I've built bridges, I've worked in the shipyards. I've seen the shipyards where they sandblast the vessels, and before they've completely cleaned up all the sand and the paint chips and everything else that's come off of the ships, they lower the ship back into the water, float it out, and everything that's trapped in the sand floats into the river and pollutes the river.
But there remains a legacy of toxic substance from industrial activities.
Can't people see what is happening to my friend?
In 2012, Governor Portland and others founded the Portland Harbor Community Coalition in an effort to raise the voice of those most impacted by contamination.
We're approached by a couple of community members in 2012 who were concerned that the public, especially people that are more affected by the contaminated river, were not aware of the cleanup efforts of the federal government and the timeline that was coming up soon for making a plan for the cleanup of the river. And so we, because the organization had done some work around cleaning up land, turning it into a community space and involving community members in that work, we decided to kind of explore what would it be like to approach community groups and individuals and start a conversation about, is there a need to have a grassroots effort or just even a community-based effort to discuss how to clean up the river. So we started having some group discussions, and after maybe 5 months of brainstorming, and it became pretty clear that there was a need to form what people decided was a coalition, a necessary kind of coming together of community groups to address the cleanup of the river and many surrounding issues as well. So early on decided that traditionally impacted communities of color, immigrant communities that are fishing in the river, that people may see a sign up that's a warning sign, a fish advisory sign down by the river, but it's out of necessity that many people are fishing. And because of the cultural connections and history of the First Nation peoples, that was also a focus that was being lost in the broader kind of context of federal agency, the Environmental Protection Agency leading this effort. And so we started forming this coalition to bring together all of these different perspectives and groups to raise the voices of folks that are most affected and have the most history here along the river, to be able to lead the effort and to be able to say this is what is the priority for these different communities. And there's a lot of common issues, and then there's a lot of culturally specific issues and ideas that have come up as well.
One of PHCC's goals is to ensure that it becomes safer to catch and consume fish.
It was a pastime and feeding,
Yeah.
We ate fish probably once a week because it was just healthy for you. And I was never sick.
The river is also very much a very spiritual element that provides life for all of us. The fish that come out of it, the nurturements, and even the seaweed, all are elements that we find respectful in our ceremonies. It teaches young people patience, going out and fishing. It teaches the river how it continually flows, to never give up and keep on going with things. Also, the river is a lifeline for us. The river are the veins that run through Mother Earth, and we need to keep her healthy.
My name is Enrique. I'm from the Videos Verdes. I like parks and rivers because I like fishing and family.
Sí, tengo una que hace como 5 años mi familia y yo fuimos a pescar y no sabíamos que el río Willamette estaba contaminado porque no estábamos informados acerca de eso. no pescamos ningún pescado, gracias a Dios, desafortunadamente para mis hijos. Pero después que supe de que el río Willamette está contaminado, le dimos gracias a Dios que nuestra salud no fue expuesto a estos químicos.
But PHCC is also concerned that as the river gets cleaned up, those that have suffered in the past may not benefit from the future river cleanup. PHCC is concerned about the houseless population living along the river. Who will get job training and jobs related to the cleanup, and how much will they pay? And what will continue to happen to housing prices in inner Portland neighborhoods as the river gets cleaned up and new developments come in?
I lived on the river for quite a while, and it has its many challenges. The river goes up and down with the weather. We have the rain to battle with, the snow, the police, the parks, our stuff being stolen from us. And then we find out about a year or so ago that the river is completely contaminated. A lot of pesticides, leads, mercuries. I fished out of these rivers. I've eaten in these rivers. I just recently beat cancer. I don't know that it wasn't because of that. Because I've lived on the rivers myself. I've eaten out of the rivers. I've swam in the rivers. There's a lot of cancer-causing agents and stuff that are in these rivers. I know I'm not the only one. Once we found out the river was contaminated and a lot of toxins in the river, we found it more complicated because we knew we had to get farther away from the river. And it made it harder because I knew I couldn't fish and we couldn't really eat out of the river.
People along the river need a safe place to go. And we need to be able to afford to get that so they can be away from the river while the cleanup is starting.
The cleanup process over the next 20 years needs to have a plan to educate and teach the people who do not have the skills and abilities to work right now today, who are discriminated against with the excuse that they're inexperienced, to give them work experience, job experience, income of a level that allows them to hold their heads up and be responsible instead of discriminated against. There's a huge opportunity, and there needs to be an educational program to teach these businesses how to work with the river and help clean the river so that it's not just the Bechtels and the Kiewits of the world that continue to make billions of dollars a year, but everyone has a chance to share in this cleanup effort. The ones who make the $1 billion a year are the ones who helped pollute and destroy it. They shouldn't make the profits of the cleaning it up.
The community that's most affected needs to have a voice in deciding how that development happens over time, and how housing and economic development, comes into play because of all of the historical displacement of the African American community, of Native folks, of just low-income people in North Portland over many decades.
Well, Emmanuel was doing the same thing to people up on this end. People had their homes on Vancouver, and they were pushing them out because they wanted that land, and they were not paying them a lot of money for it. It was corporates. It's been bad here all the time. It's just been a gradual taking over. I mean, it's very, very subtle, but once you really see the pattern, it's not subtle. It's very planned out. The people that are the most tangible are your lower rent. I mean, your lower income people, and it's usually people of color.
It's an issue that more people should know about and be able to get involved with to, really make a difference for the community and decide what the community wants to see change. There's one thing with this federal process happening to clean up the river, but how can the community come together and decide what's the highest priority.
Me gustaría que de aquí en 20 años el problema esté resuelto para que las familias y comunidades vengamos a un lugar seguro a disfrutarlos y poder dejarle también a las nuevas generaciones un río sano. Y me gustaría que se siga trabajando para poder seguirnos educando, porque si lo van a limpiar de aquí a 20 años, si no hay una educación de cómo debemos protegerlos, siento que podría pasar lo mismo. Entonces, me gustaría que una vez esté limpio, la gente esté educada para preservar el río.
I just see that the river actually getting cleaned up so that, like my husband said, so that people can have a home to go back to, fish, swim, eat the fish. To have their camps back there and to be happy again. We need a clean and safe river.
What it means to be a Portlander is that we are a green state. We are known to be a green state. And if we knowingly let our river be polluted every single day, then what are we really doing here?
Las personas que están aquí hayan escogido este lugar para saber sobre la contaminación del río. Sobre todo cómo ver a los participantes dar su opinión y tratar de buscar una mejor solución para la limpieza del río.
Yeah, I think it's important that we can still use the river as a resource and we can still enjoy the river because it's been part of, you know, our city, our town, our state for so long, and just seeing what it's become is really tragic. And so I think it's important that we clean it up so we can get back to being able to use it and being able to enjoy it the way that we used to.
Native people, non-native people, all of us together need to take part in this. A lot of the businesses and potential responsible parties, they have to play their role. But we as residents, we as taxpayers and voters, we have to make our voice heard. Our community especially welcomes allies and people who share the same values we do, the values of harmony, the values of connecting in nature to people, and not just the bottom line of profit. We are all about standing together with everyone.
What I'd like to see is for the river to eventually get cleaned up. The people who, in the past and in the present, be responsible for the contaminants that have been put in the river. There's still many companies, manufacturers, corporations that are along the rivers that I still don't think are doing their part to be able to help keep the river cleaned up. But to hold them responsible for helping clean up the rivers so that one day we'll have a clean, safe place to call home along the Willamette River.
We have used this river for transport, for food, for everything, for life, for thousands of years, and it's time we should go back to that. I think there should be jobs. We want the positive part of jobs, but they need to be clean jobs, not just where the river's used as a waste stream for dirty jobs.
De aquí a 20 años, mi visión es que el río Willamette esté seguro, esté limpio y todos estemos libres para ir a divertirnos, a nadar, jugar en la arena, a que nuestros hijos puedan pescar pescados libres de contaminantes, sin riesgo de nuestra salud, y que todos estemos compartiendo el río y conviviendo sin ninguna preocupación de que nos podamos enfermar o algo más.
When people were exposed to contaminants in the shipyards, how do you take back someone's life
you
or
can't
someone's
take
health?
back their life, and then you don't. Then it doesn't even come out until the person is dead. My dad was dead by the time they really started saying mesothelioma was caused by asbestos and all of this, and he suffered. And I don't even want to talk about that.
Yeah.
It just makes me so angry. Yeah. Because his environment killed him.
It belongs to us. That river belongs to the people.
People can be healed, rivers can be healed.
The location was downtown Portland, Not the Portland he grew up in, but the metropolitan city it had become. Now I know what they mean by the good old days. I remember swimming in the Willamette, the delicious fish we ate. And now we are warned not to swim, nor eat the fish. Mutilated fish, decimated fish. Can't they see from their Lexuses and their fine cars that speed across the bridges, taking them to high-powered jobs, that my friend, my river is dying? The room was crowded as protesters stated their cases one by one. And I felt vindicated that some others had seen the distress of my friend. And discussions of meetings with city council, wildlife departments, Safe Water, and others that were raising their voices to save her. She is worthy to be saved, they cried. She has done the job as a river. She has done it proudly for years. We must save her. We can save her. We will save her, was their chant. And the river heard their voices and decided to delay her dying until help could come.